Many NAFA members are manufacturers looking to streamline their processes and operations. We brought in Kevin Young, a lean manufacturing expert, to the 2022 annual conference. Kevin shares how the administration of a lean management system can offer efficiency and improvements to your manufacturing process. Enjoy.
You're listening to the Talking Air Filtration podcast, where you get to know the people that make air filtration possible and help us all breathe easier. Because clean air matters.
We'll get insights from air filtration professionals and learn how they became successful in their careers. Along the way, we will discuss best practices, guidelines, trends, and challenges in air filtration in a variety of applications. We hope HVAC, air filtration, and indoor air quality pros, including business development, engineering, building owners, and facilities management, will enjoy the insights our guests will bring to this podcast.
Please join me in welcome Kevin Young, Senior RCI Manager at H&I Company. Kevin has a total of 17 years of manufacturing experience and 13 years of continuous improvement experience. Kevin is now responsible for implementing and teaching lean principles for all facilities in the Muscatine H&I campus. Kevin is here today to talk about how we've used the lean management system to help execute their operation and administration. He has been a manager of some of our engineers, and we like to call him at our place the Dean of Lean. So please help me in welcoming Kevin Young.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I want to talk a little bit about H&I as a whole. So the gentleman on the left there is George Konensacker. So H&I produces office furniture, and George was really an early adopter of lean back in the 80s and the 90s. And he's the one that really came into H&I and drove the culture of continuous improvement. And he really was brought in there because at the time, H&I/Han had problems with lead times. Okay, so we had to change the way we were manufacturing product, and he was really kind of the founder of driving that culture. The next individual up there is Mr. Nakao. You know, Teiichi Ono was the founder of, kind of the developer of lean. And then if you don't know the story of like Mr. Ono, he eventually wanted to drive lean into his suppliers. So he created this supplier kind of Kaizen team. Mr. Nakao was one of those individuals who was on that supplier team. And he eventually started his own consulting business, which was called Shingazitsu USA. And Shingazitsu USA was hired by H&I, all right? So you can see kind of the direct correlation of H&I, kind of our lean foundation, all the way back to kind of the original Toyota production system. Now, on that journey, H&I was able to really win the Shingo Prize, which is like the greatest achievement you can get in terms of manufacturing. So we've had a few plants that have won the Shingo Prize. We've also had a few plants have the industry best week. So again, good accomplishments and accreditations in terms of some of the stuff we've been doing. So the other thing that I want to talk about, just kind of in terms of H&I, in terms of continuous improvement, is really our business process improvement model, which is on the lower left-hand corner. And there's an acronym in there that I really like to kind of explain, which is the USSF, which is understand, simplify, stabilize, and flow. And that's a really good principle because any problem you come along, you want to just understand it, simplify it, and try to stabilize it and get it to flow. So we really like to drive that and create value for our customers. And then additionally, we've also created an internal kind of like training program, which is that bronze, silver, kind of this lower pyramid here. And then finally, we're also developing our operations system. And again, this is how we audit and kind of maintain. We have 9 locations, so that's something we like to do as well. So a little bit about me. I want to really share some of the experiences that I've done across the last few years. I've had various roles in terms of engineer, supervisor, factory manager, skilled trades manager, plant manager. And I feel like I'm an expert in some of the lean tools, but what we're going to talk about here today is the lean management. And then kind of just show some experience. And the goal here today is that you guys have something you can take away that you can drive in your own practices. So what is lean? Lean is really a production and administrative ideology of really maximizing productivity, eliminating waste, and adding value. So again, adding waste, eliminating waste, adding value. And if there's two core principles within lean that I'd like you to take away from today is really around throughput and waste. So we're going to talk about each one of those. Throughput and waste. If there's anything you can pick out, if there's 1,000 lean tools out there, but throughput and waste is the way really I ask all of you to really look at your operations. So throughput is defined as the amount of time it takes to go through your entire process from beginning to end. So I'll say that one more time. It's the amount of time it takes to go through your process from beginning to end. So I have a little diagram up here. Now you have a factory which supplies parts. Again, they get received in, they get processed in some sort of way, inventory piles up, and then maybe something else happens, you got another inventory pile up, and you have another process, whether it be, folding filters, painting of something, right? And eventually that product gets shipped, it gets shipped out. All of that equals some element of time. And that's the way you really want to look at your operation. So let's take a whole nother scenario here. Administrative. You have the payroll department. Again, same type of principle, but I'm translating it back to an administrative function. So you have the payroll department. They get something comes into them, whether it's paper time cards, maybe you have an ERP system that something comes to them, but they have processes as well. Maybe they do emails, maybe they get some sort of inventory for them. They have to do some other process. That builds up as well. Inventory process. Well, guess what? It's an administrative function, completely different from operations or some sort of operations, but that is time as well, end to end. So you can kind of translate throughput. So now that you're looking at your throughput in terms of you understand kind of the concept of throughput, the goal of every operation or any process is really to go through and identify the waste within that. And if you can identify the waste, you can shrink your time and you can start to improve your process. So again, this is a very important kind of concept in terms of lean. Be looking at your processes from end to end and identify the areas that create waste. So I have a little video here, so I'm going to preface this. This is out of our manufacturing plant in one of our areas in Muscatine. Now, this original video had 4 days of throughput, and we've since improved it to 4 hours of throughput. So it's a good example of what throughput looks like. So I'll go ahead and play it. So we have aluminum lineal. A lineal gets picked up, it gets put in a cart, it gets staged, and then eventually that lineal moves to the saw, gets saw cut, right? Then it moves to this block saw where it gets another operation. So we've already transported it. It gets hit by the block, we put it in a cart with a bunch of inventory, and it sits there and it waits. Eventually that cart, it needs to get moved to somewhere. Oh, about hit a tugger guy, gets moved, and we overprocess it. We take it out of that cart and put it in a rack to handle it. Then eventually we grab that part, it runs through, gets hardware, gets married up in a cart to what? Sit and wait again. Eventually that cart gets transported, 200 yards down the plant, all the way around the corner to sit and wait again. And then eventually, because we've handled it so many times, now it requires rework. It has defects, so we need to sand it. We have to prepare it for the paint line. And then that goes to the paint line, and eventually it waits again. Then it finally gets paint. It goes all the way through paint line. This is what throughput looks like. And if you start to look at this, you think, my gosh, this is crazy. Why would I ever do this, right? But again, it's that thoughtful vision around what is throughput and understanding what it really looks like. Eventually that part gets painted, gets in the cart, and then it gets prepared to go to the pack out where guess what? It gets transported, it waits again, eventually gets handled again, and then eventually gets to, we get to pack it out and send it to the DC. So just a real kind of simple video around what throughput looks like. And again, I think all of us in here, if we were operational folks or anybody, would say that is not how we would want to set it up. Right? So again, look at your operations in terms of throughput. So there's 3 forms of waste. So we've talked about throughput, now we're talking about waste. The first waste is the Japanese term Muda, which is waste, and there's 7 of those. So you have overproduction. This is where you're just stamping parts or making parts. They're not sold, they have nowhere to go, nothing's happening with them, you're just making it. Waiting, we saw a good example of what waiting looked like in that video. Transporting. We saw that moving all the way around the plant. That's where you're taking it out of that cart and put it in the rack, right? That's overprocessing. Motion, again, motion's a little harder to see, but it's basically like if you had a tool, you want something that you don't want to have to take 2 steps to grab it. You want to be able to grab that motion, have the same consistent motion repeatedly. Inventory, we saw good examples of that in that video, so pretty self-explanatory. Defects, again, rework, something's wrong with the part, you don't want that, right? What's the worst of the 7 wastes? What's the worst one you can have? Overproduction. Why overproduction? Because you're making inventory. That inventory is going to wait. That inventory is going to have to get moved. It's going to have to get touched. Because you're making so much inventory, has the more likelihood to get damaged. You're going to have to transport it. So it's definitely the worst of all of them. So because it creates all of the other waste. Mura, unevenness. So unevenness really refers to type of scheduling, ups and downs. You don't want to work your people on Saturday, right? To not have any work on Monday, right? The goal is to level the orders, have a consistent amount that continues to get produced time over time. Okay? And then the final one here is Muri, which is overburdening. Overburdening is harder to see. It's the hardest of the 3 types of waste. Why? Well, it's usually in the form of equipment, which is machine downtime, or in humans. I'm running my machine 24 hours a day. I don't have any time to TPM it. I don't have any time to repair it. It eventually is going to become overburdened. It's going to break down. It's going to fail. It goes with a human. I'm working them a bunch of overtime. I'm messing with their schedules all the time. Eventually, they get tired and they get overburdened. If you have super fast cycle times, it can be overburdened very fast. Muri is definitely the hardest one to see, but it is definitely probably that causes the most disruption. So now that we understand throughput and we understand waste, what happens in an operation where you have waste? Chaos, right? So if you're not controlling your waste, you have chaos. So I sometimes grow my hair a little bit long sometimes, and I definitely will grab it and I'll do that, and some people look at me like, oh my gosh. So I've definitely had my moments of chaos, right? So what happens? You have instability. You get to become too busy. So I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna work on this fire, and I'm gonna forget about quality. I'm gonna forget about safety. That's not what you want, right? You don't want instability. Start working long hours, start getting stressed, start to ignore problems. I have a saying that I really teach my supervisors or my lower level staff people. Workarounds are anti-improvement. You could be in a situation where you're going to have a bunch of workarounds. You have to really decide which ones you're going to solve, which problems you're going to solve. Draw a line in the sand on some of them. There's going to be times where you're going to have to work around, but if there's a critical one, you need to solve that problem, right? And when you have chaos, when you have waste, you have no value added. And our goal in any type of operation is to create value added, all right? We want value added, not non-value added. So what's a way that we can manage that, right? And I believe there's 2 types of ways we can manage that. Leader standard work, which I'm kind of representing with the chassis and the wheel, and a tiered management system. And we're going to dive into each one of these a little bit. So in the book, Creating a Lean Culture by David Mann, he defines leader standard work as 4 elements. You must have standard work of some sort, standard operating procedures maybe for some of you. You must make it visual. You must have an accountability meeting. And then he says discipline. I like to use pour gas on it. And you can see, and it's represented. So I like to represent that as the car, the chassis, and the engine and the gas. You got to have those main components to make something work together. And then we have some examples. So we're going to go through kind of each one of these a little bit. So this is my standard work when I was a value stream leader or a factory manager. These were my tasks. This is my standard work when I was leading a factory at H&I. And within this, I have some sort of time period, Monday through Thursday, Monday through Friday. Here's the things I got to get done. Then I defined what was my cadence. Is it something that I needed to review daily? Was it something I could do Mondays? Was it something I could do Tuesdays? Then obviously I defined what my tasks are. What are the things I need to be checking? What are the things that we need to be doing? And then in my little piece of paper, I like to have a sheet. So metrics were very important to me. Maybe there were certain things I needed to jot it down so I could make an accurate decision for the next day. And in the upper right-hand corner, I have an audit there as well. So things I was checking on. And then finally, follow-up. What are the things that, if I find issues, what do I need to follow up? What do I need to correct? So just to give you some perspective of how I structured this, Mondays, the daily tasks, they were scheduling, they were the production meetings, how am I doing? Was there any safety incidents from the other day? Just standard checks, right? And then the way I like to structure it is on Monday, let's talk about safety items. I want to deep dive in safety. How are we doing on those things? What can I do? What can I improve? How are we doing? What was my first aids? Do we have corrective actions in place? Tuesdays, it's quality. Let's deep dive into quality. What are the numbers telling me? Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? What are our corrective actions? What are the things we're doing, right? Cost, member engagement, and that's how I structured it. And it's a good reminder, you get in a process. First element of all the 4 elements is leader standard work. The second element is visual systems. So I'm big on visual management. It's kind of one of my favorite topics here. So material, in my same department, the same value stream, I had, these are my critical areas. So I had material delivery, the fabric department, the paint department, and what was the other one? Metals. And then I had safety, quality, cost, right? And members, staffing. And again, these pictures aren't pretty because it doesn't need to be pretty, right? Here's what my actual boards looked like, as you can see. So I've got them broke up. There's lots of paper on there. There's things that are important to me that I wanted to make visual. It's a snapshot, right? I could do it very easily as a leader. So I wanted to dive into one of these. So in this particular example, in the fabric department, I had metrics. In this fabric department, I cared about what was my delivery and how good was I delivering good quality. So my deliveries were sequence attainment. Am I delivering what they need, when they need it, how they want it, at the right time they wanted it? And then was I doing that with good quality? That's what I cared about from a supporting factory, giving it to my customers internally. Those were the 2 metrics that I cared about. The next thing over there is special. So here's where it gets a little unique. So at H&I, we can put any fabric on any chair, anything you want, right? But that fabric comes at a cost. It has a higher lead time. So the last thing I wanted to do is give that fabric to some new member and possibly have it damaged, have it cut wrong, have some sort of issues with it. So I created a process so I could get visibility to special fabrics. I could understand who, what, when, how, where, why. There's no way that fabric was going to get through and get screwed up. So I created a special process, again, very unique to what my business was, what my situation was, and I posted it and we made it visual. I got visibility to that, right? And then guess what? Chaos does occur. Things do happen. So a simple 5 why form. What are the issues when issues do occur? What are they? How do we do them? What's going on with them? Why? Let's get it fixed. And the other one that I think is just so simple but yet so effective is this staffing board. So if you look at this, you're going to see colors up there. Blue, right? Green, pink, and silver. What do you think the yellows are? New members. Why would I want to flag new members on my staffing board? Well, they're the most likely to create chaos, right? So they're newer, maybe they haven't got trained all the way, right? So I wanted to identify who they were, very simple, very visual. Go out there, talk to them. How you doing? Do you need support? Are you getting the help that you need? Are you trained properly? And then at the end of their 100-day or kind of their onboarding process, we had a little celebration. Congratulations, here's your pink card. Remove your yellow and slide it in, okay? And the other thing we used with visuals with that was like, hey, were they CPR certified? Were they quality certified? So again, I could know, were they a certified trainer, right? Again, using visual management to help to really key into individual members. So again, very simple yet effective, very effective visual management tools. So COVID, big deal, right? From a supply chain standpoint, lots of problems. So this is an example that I worked on with a couple other groups in terms of developing this visual system. So we were measuring supplier corrective action. So this is, hey, we got bad quality. What's your corrective action to it? Past due POs. I'm sure a lot of you were getting a lot of those here probably in your business, right? So where were they? What was going on with them? Expedites. Obviously, there was things we just couldn't live without, so we paid more, got it in. Where are they at? How it's coming? How is our inventory health? Is our inventory health good? Is it bad? Again, very effective, kind of very specific metrics to a specific problem that we're going to make visual. Inbound quality inspections, open compressions. This is when orders don't align with something that we have in schedules. Guess what? It's going to become a past due PO if we don't make it. So do something about it. So again, proactive kind of metric. And then finally, newspaper and cost. And at the end of the day, here's what some of the dashboards looked like. And we posted those and made them visual. That way we could know the score, we could know what we're doing, and we could handle it. Making the process visual.
Are your air filtration personnel NAFA certified? Ask if they belong to NAFA and have their certified air filter specialist or NAFA certified technician designations. The CAFS and NCT designations are earned after rigorous exams and demonstrate that the air filtration professional has a high degree of knowledge and professionalism. To learn more about NAFA certifications, visit nafahq.org.
So some other visual management tools, again, from a factory perspective, but in the lower left, you have the QDCS board, which is the lowest level kind of supervisor. Hey, how are we doing on delivery? Again, you can kind of see there it's, red and green. Policy deployment, probably very standard for a lot of you in here in terms of, hey, what's the overall metrics from month to month? And you've defined what's important to you, right? KPI, key performance indicator. That's the next one up there in the middle there. Again, it might have lots of metrics specifically around quality where you're measuring scrap, first pass yield, whatever your numbers are with the newspaper. And then finally, there's lots of times where in our role where we don't have a good metric. And we just need to define what some metric is and graph it in some way, shape, or form. One of mine was a tally mark. How many times were people coming and talking to one of my individual members and what department where they were? And whichever tallied was the most, that was who I needed to go work on. That works too. Define what it is, right? Third element of leader standard work is accountability meeting. So I had a mentor just drill this in my head. Don't you ever have a meeting without a purpose, a desired result, or an agenda? How many? Let's just do a quick raise of hands. How many meetings how many of in here have been in a meeting where no decision has ever been made and no action came out of that meeting? Can't have that. Because guess what? Meetings are a form of throughput in whatever your setting may be. If you don't make that decision, if you don't make that action, you're not going to, move the process. Now it's going to be waiting for you to make a decision on that. And you can't have that. There's a great video out there, Death by Meeting. It's like 15 minutes long. It goes through this. It's a great kind of video if you're ever curious. But there's different types of meetings as well. There's like daily check-in meetings, very fast. Like, hey, are we good? Are we bad? Are we good? Are we bad? We call that kind of our 7:30 production meeting where we go through. We have human relations in there. We have quality. We have safety. And it's round robin. We're done in 15 minutes. Stand up only. Visual management is used. Then you're going to have monthly or quarterly meetings, different types of sessions. But again, what's the agenda? What's the purpose? What's the desired result? Can't stress that enough. If someone puts a meeting on my calendar, doesn't have one of those things, I'm not going. So here's an example of an accountability meeting that I personally own. So in my role today, I'm really heavily involved in strategic kind of initiatives, and I drive the strategic end of things. So this is my accountability meeting that I'm the owner of. And so if we look at this, in this so we do quarterly strategic initiatives. We divvy those out. We assign leaders, give resources, and things need to happen, okay? We will define who the leader is, what's the initiative, what's the champion, what's the KPI score, what are the actions associated with that, and then how are they going to tell the score? Are we winning or are we losing? Our goal of this meeting is to understand where are we at with the initiative, are we on track, and do you need help? That's the whole goal, because we can't lose sight of what the initiative and then come back later and say, oh, we didn't realize that was happening. Now I guess we just lost 3 months, no big deal, right? No, that's not acceptable, right? So again, the cadence is we do it 2 times a month. It's 15 minutes long. The presenters and the leader and the champion have to present. And again, what's the timeline? What's the metrics? Are we on track or off track? So you can see what the picture of the visual board is kind of on the right and how it looks. And we do no more than we only do 4 initiatives within a quarter, right? Ideally, we would just do 3. So we can look at this and we can start to see some things. It's likely on my standard work that Thursdays, I need to be at my strategic initiative meeting, which I probably need to plan, make sure my meeting notes is update. What's the purpose? What's the agenda? It's visual. I've got the visual element up there. I have a purpose, desired result of the agenda of the meeting. So you can start to see how these elements are starting to build on each other. The 4th element of leader standard work is discipline, process control, or as I like to say, pouring gas. All right. What's our roles as leaders, managers? I'm sure a lot of you in this audience are likely leaders or managers of some sort. Our job is to manage the process, not the metrics. If we set our processes up right and we think we have things correct, then all we need to do is run that process correct, and the metrics should come, right? But there's likely waste in there, there's likely things in there. But if we keep dialing in those processes, that's our roles. Follow up and be a servant leader. Servant leadership is, how can I help you? And we're going to see a little bit of what this should look like in the tiered meeting structure here in a minute, right? And then finally, get people to act. There's too many times when you can sit around analysis by paralysis. I'm afraid to go try something on the floor. What if that doesn't work? Oh my God, life is going to end. You have to take action. Without action, you're never going to know, right? How can we manage processes? We talked about it. We can make them visual. And another really effective a good tool is called the layered process audits. Layered process audits is when you have a critical process and someone from the leadership team goes out there and validates things are in control. That could be as easy as, hey, the TPM was completed and I can see that John has signed off on it. That process, I just did a layered process audit on TPM. One of my most effective tools as a leader that I really enjoy doing is a second level layered process audit. This is where my leader, who I'm responsible for, has said he has done something, and I'm going to go check that he has actually done it. Sometimes they get it done, and guess what? Sometimes they don't get it done, right? And that's a great opportunity to coach. Why did you not get it done? Were you overburdened? Did we have a scheduling problem? Start to understand the root causes of that. Second level layered process audit. And then the third is really have a tiered management structure, right? So get people to action, right? So what's a tiered management structure look like? So you have a team leader, you have a supervisor, you have a value stream leader, and you have a plant manager. And I'm sure a lot of you in here are thinking, hey, we already have that structure. That makes sense to us, right? So how does it differ in kind of these? How do you put these two together? There you go, right? I've defined what the standard work for that team leader is. I've defined what his visual systems are. I've defined what his accountability or his meetings should be. And he has his elements. There's things that he should be applying gas to or having process control, right? And guess what? They're different at all levels. So what a supervisor, what a value stream leader, and what a plant manager reviews, they're completely different. Their standard tasks are different, but they're just as important to make sure that those processes are there, they're sound, and guess what? The visual systems are different, right? The accountability meetings are different. A plant manager is going to be looking at volume, strategic things, what the forecast is. And again, that supervisor is going to be looking at what are the problems I'm having on the shop floor and how do I solve that? So what happens when problems do occur? Escalations go up. Team leader says, I got a problem on the floor. I can't solve it. Supervisor, can you help me solve it? Nope, I can't help solve it. Value stream leader, yep, I can solve that. I've got it. Escalations go up. Help and follow-up comes down. Again, our roles as leaders, drive it down. And this is really what the tiered management structure is really is meant to do. Have standard tasks with standard processes, make them visual, and when you have some sort of form of chaos, help drive that up, and leaders would help they have the resources, they have the power to get what the people need to solve the problems. So here's an example of our tiered management structure that I've implemented throughout all of the Muscatine campus, okay? So at the top is policy deployment. And if you notice, the second level there is our strategic initiatives. So we have a thing. Are we running the business today? or are we improving the business today? And we like to evaluate that. So a good example of are we running or are we improving? When COVID was happening, guess what? A lot of our PD metrics started to turn to red. We started missing on delivery, started missing on cost. So we had to switch from improving the business to where we had to shift our focus over to running the business. That's why PD is at the top. If the trains are on track, everything's good, let's go improve the business. Let's go to the next level down, and we'll go to the strategic level. And then in the lower right-hand corner, we have our strategic initiatives that we assign, and we drive that, right? And again, the second level kind of piece of that is our strategic initiative boards, which I've already reviewed. So again, we're able to improve the business. Here's how we make that visual, and we drive it. The next tiered is what we call our factory kind of business boards. So if in this particular example, if you look at it, at the top, you have a factory PD scorecard. 9 times out of 10, that factory PD scorecard is going to be different than that plant PD scorecard, because what's going on in that particular factory, that particular department, are different metrics, and they need a different level of focus, right? Then they have their scores, their KPIs, right, in terms of safety, quality, cost, delivery. What are they doing for their members? Kind of what we talked about earlier. And then what are their key indicators? What are the things they need to be looking at, and some sort of cadence? And then finally, newspaper and actions. This meeting here happens monthly at the end of it. Again, it's an overall kind of factory review. And then one thing I'd like to point out on the, let me see if I can get this laser pointer. Over here, you'll see they have a strategic portion of their board. So as we start to roll out strategic initiatives, so I work in a 900,000 square foot building. We have 6 different departments. What happens on one end of the building likely doesn't translate. So we want to make sure that everybody, when we launch a strategic initiative, is aligned to what that is. And so we communicate it, and we make sure that it's updated properly on their board so they can understand what's going on. So they at least are connected to what's happening. They at least got it on their board, and they at least know, hey, we're working on standard work this month. I probably need to support that in some way, shape, or form. So we've connected that. And then finally, our base level kind of MDI, our lowest level. This would be our supervisors, our team leads. These would be the things that they're managing. Hey, my first pass yield, I sent back quality downstream, first aid today. Those are the things that make it to this board. And then we drive action. And we have the owners, who owns the board, and just some other things. Example of tiered management structure. And what's important here? Again, escalations go up, help comes down. Finally, with the end here, this is Sensei Sugai. He's one of my biggest mentors. If you take no action, nothing will happen. Not seeing is not knowing. So when these guys come in, they just pound you. They just pound you. And you get out into the shop floor and you go try things. And we have another saying, it's like fail and fail fast. Can't stress that enough. Take action, try something. If it fails, that's what you're gonna know, and just you'll move on. Experiments. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak today. Hopefully you did kind of learn something in this presentation that you can take back to your business. But again, throughput, right? Waste, and then how do you control that waste in a tiered management and leader standard work? Yeah, questions?
The throughput slide, you didn't show like the order process going to, you just talked about the factory, I gather, or the production, not, I guess, the process from order generation to processing the order to get into the plant floor.
Right.
And you mentioned, you're able to reduce 4 days into 4 hours or whatever, but that process could be 4 hours or 4 days too, like just to get it to
Absolutely.
So is that a different, like someone else looking at the throughput at that point, or?
I mean, in general, in a value stream mapping process, you'll map out the information flow and the physical process flow, but no, absolutely not. And that's kind of what the premise around that administrative functions. If you look at some of the administrative functions, how much time is taking that? So a perfect example of that is if we print out 100 pieces of paper and we have to staple something on, that's throughput time as well. It's, again, the definition of throughput is from looking at something from the beginning to the end of your process and that total amount of time.
But again, you were just looking at the production side of it, not the processing of the order itself and the generating of the order. And
yeah, in this particular example, yes. In that particular example, yes.
All right.
That was really our big focus, was fixing that flow.
How was the other flow though? Because I mean that could, you could improve the production to 4 hours and be real happy, and then find out it's taking you 6 days to get the order from.
It wasn't taking 4 days, I promise you that much,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So
All right.
we're on an Oracle-based system, so a lot of those things, can happen very fast.
Okay.
Good question.
Over here, I have a question. Those are incredible visual management boards. From when you started developing them, say like your people board, how long did it take? Or are you still just always going through reiterations of it? Because we're starting to track our numbers.
Yep.
We have some KPIs, but in other areas we don't. And I think sometimes we get impatient that evolution that needs to happen of first we start measuring just what it is to.
Yeah, I would encourage you to, not knowing the particular situation. In this particular situation, we were able to drive it very fast. But like I said earlier, if something isn't taking off, I would question whether or not it's the right metric, right? Lots of companies try to do 5S and some of those things, and they don't, it's hard to take off because you need to really start small. Again, when I talked about the one was kind of the tick mark, right? And it was basically, it was a quality metric is what it was. So I talked about the fabric delivery, but at the time when I first came to this factory, we didn't have a way to measure quality. So what was happening in this particular factory is the line leads were coming back to the department and saying, hey, I don't have this thing, right? I don't have my fabric. So it was simply, how many times is that department coming back here, right? And from then it was saying, okay, because I didn't have a metric yet. Okay, this tiles factory came back 20 times. This panels factory came back 5. Okay, I'm going to go deep dive. What are all these tile problems? So now I'm going to start asking, hey, when you're coming back, what's your problem? What are you seeing? What's going on? And then I started to derive that, right? And that's where the metric really started to evolve. And then eventually it turned into first pass yield. Hey, I'm sending you 100 units every day, and 20 of them are falling out. I'm at an 80% pass rate. And then I started to build off that. But it started with a simple tick mark. Again, visual management, just, again, standards, visual management, they can be whatever you want them to be in order to properly help your business. Again, I kind of used that fabric example of the special fabric, a close to home metric. It can be whatever you want to be. It doesn't have to be some system generated type of thing. Use what makes sense for whatever problem you're trying to solve. Another question over here.
I was wondering, a lot of the way you manage the business is driven by metrics. We're a pretty small business. We have an ERP, not sophisticated at all. I was wondering, how can you come up with some sort of a database or a way to aggregate the metrics or the data in order to produce most of the KPIs that you show to your group?
How do we do that? I guess.
Yeah, do you have simple ways to put together a database or?
That's a good question. Yeah. I guess we have really smart engineers that can take the data and compile it the way we'd like to see it. But again, a lot of those are simple metrics. Again, so let's take delivery, for example, right? When we scan out a unit, that unit has cost tied to it in terms of labor. And we also know that unit was scanned. That generates our delivery number. So again, back to the same example. If we had 100 units in the schedule for that day and we didn't scan one out, we would show we missed one, right? And our system would generate that back, right? We use a lot of Power BI as some of the things that we're using.
Yeah, I was trying to go outside of any ERP system. I was just wondering.
Yeah,
you
depending on your ERP system, you got to have something that can manipulate the data, right? Otherwise, you're in some crazy access databases and Excel spreadsheets that won't even open up. But again, a lot of those floor level metrics, they're very simple kind of, basic metrics. Then, the factory boards, they're measuring things like scrap. We have a out-of-box audit process where we open units that have been finished and we validate whether they're good. That generates a quality number. A lot of ours are really, I wouldn't say they're fancy metrics. They're really manual generated kind of, here's what the issues we're seeing.
Thank you.
But we could talk for hours about Internet of Things and Power BI and all of that if you want to have that conversation. That's a lot of the world I'm living in now.
I know that you said, why didn't you, that one of the questions with the discipline and process control is asking someone, why didn't you get something done? Are you overburdened or scheduling problems?
Yep.
But how do you distinguish between an inefficient process and an ineffective person?
Yeah. There's 1,000 lean tools in the lean toolbox. The biggest, and we're in a whole standard work kind of conversation here, but basically if it were me, I would use a 7 waste kind of evaluation sheet where you take those 7 wastes and you're basically monitoring what that operator is doing and what are they doing, right? And then eventually you would do a time study and you would say, hey, in some sort of standard, they should be producing this at some repeatable rate. And then all of those things that can't, all the reasons of why they can't produce at that reasonable rate, those wastes should flag, okay? And then you can kind of determine whether it's the operator. So again, it's the whole standard work, sum of cycles, cycle time bar chart, right? And you measure that, right? And you can put a factor on how well, or again, so if you're doing it, for example, if you're doing a time study, you can basically say, hey, I think this member's working 80%. They're not going 100%, which kind of bumps the number. It correlates the number, right? So when we develop processes within H&I, we like to have that cycle time be about 20% below what the tack time is. Does everybody tack time, cycle time? Well, I'm speaking a language here. Okay, so tack time, okay, is your available demand, okay, divided by basically the number of units you have to produce in a day, and you'll get a tack time, okay? It'll tell you the amount of time you have to make each unit. That is like the baseline. That is like where you set everything, okay? And that goes off available seconds. Then once you have that baseline, your cycle times need to be below that. So just rough kind of math here. So if your cycle time is double what your tack time is, you need 2 people to do that. And then what we like to say is, I like that bar to be 20% below than that, because that allows for some waste. That allows for some abnormalities where they can repeatedly hit it over and over and over again. Cycle time versus tack time. Again, I didn't want to kind of get into some of those, but if you want to have a discussion, I can show you some things related to that to help you with that if you need help with that. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the Talking Air Filtration Podcast, a production of the National Air Filtration Association. Clean air matters.